This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring former FBI Special Agent and Chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, Robin Dreeke.
Osage County Sheriff Eddie Virden doing a lot of speaking on the BTK returning to the spotlight as we now enter, I guess, Chapter 3 in this horrible saga. They decided to investigate a possible link between Rader and a woman who disappeared many years ago, 1976, Cynthia Kinney, when he learned that Rader had included the phrase "bad laundry day" in his writings. The connection goes back to 1976, where, in fact, Cynthia Kinney went missing from her parents' laundromat and then was later found bound, tortured, and killed. This is an area that is outside of Wichita. It was not typically, as one would think of, on Rader's path, but when you look back, Rader was working for, of all places, ADT at the time, installing security systems at the time that it appears Cynthia Kinney went missing. And now we've learned there's another possible 5 cases in total that are cold that are being looked at. That's according to Carrie Rosson, his daughter, who's been speaking on it. How deep do we go here? How deep do you think we're going to go here as this movie, horrible movie, now gets its 3rd installment?
If nothing else, some of these families might finally find some rest of understanding what happened. And so that, I think, is potentially helpful. I had to take a deeper dive on serial killers with this one because what we normally used to seeing both in the movies and on true crime podcasts and things like that is, we see psychopathy at work with a serial killer, which is grandiosity. Look at me, look how great I am, which BTK was one of the best at, look at me, look how great I was at doing this. And so he's seen, especially with, the Gilgo Beach murders coming up, he wants to be back in a spotlight again. So you would think that a lot of that, and a good number of them do confess to all the murders because they want to say, look, I was the greatest of all time. And so I had to take a deeper dive and look at, well, why wouldn't they share all the murders that they committed? There's still another side of this, and that is power and control. And to still hold information that you think that you are smarter than the law enforcement, smarter than the prosecutor, smarter than all, it actually holds a lot of weight with serial killers as well. And so it's balancing, giving as much as you need to have the feeling of grandiosity and greatest in the world at their horrendous acts. At the same time, holding some back because it makes me feel even better and more empowered that I got away with this and they never even knew about this. And so I think that's what happened here. And so the good thing is that it could if he's going to be prosecuted for these other murders and there's a death penalty on the line for it, as I'm reading, or a different place to be imprisoned or a different way of life, that could compel him to confess to more. So we'll see.
We'll see. Right now, there is something on the table, a deal on the table of confessing and immunity. Just, admit to it and let's be done. He's not done that yet. He has, over the last year, especially since the Koberger case came up, he's been commenting left and right on this case, on Huerman's case. He's found a nice little niche where seemingly people are listening to him because people are reporting what he's saying outside of prison. I found that kind of odd over the last year. I know he loves attention. I lived in Wichita for 10 years. I'm very familiar with the case and everything that he did and his obsession with it. But I did find it odd that suddenly, after about 15 years of being fairly quiet behind bars, he was starting to speak again and starting to talk about other cases. It's kind of had me on edge a little bit watching that because I've been feeling he's going to do something or something's going to come up. There's more that he wants attention to other than just these other cases. And I think maybe now we found it. I think behind bars, this is my thought, my conjecture, behind bars, he knew there's these other ones that have not been discovered yet. He's 78 years old. He wants to get that last bit of attention before he's gone and get the credit for the deeds that he had done all those years ago. Am I far off in that way of thinking?
It's probably a part of the whole, no doubt. And just because we haven't heard from him doesn't mean he wasn't trying to talk. It's just that no one was listening. I think that's part of it also. And now that there's another serial killer that had similar telltale signs, that's when people were starting to listen to him again. And so his mouthpiece also, in other words, I don't think his mouthpiece ever stopped blabbering. I think it was turned off to the listeners until all of a sudden there's something that was relevant. But yeah, these moments in life, I mean, who knows, he's having, come and seeing his mortality a little bit more. So he wants to claim more fame for himself. That's probably, as I said, I think it's a part of the whole, but I also think part of it was not having anyone want to listen to his crap anymore. But now there's a reason to.
He is still denying these crimes. Sheriff Eddie Virden is the one who spoke to him in his cell several times over the summer. What do you make of the fact that before Ed even went in and said, hey, this is the case we're investigating, we want to know more about it, he just started talking to him and got BTK to open up and explain one of his fantasies to him, which would be about watching a girl in the laundromat till she was alone. And then he'd go in with a ruse, get her in his vehicle, and then have her, and nobody would see her, hear anything as he did his BTK stuff. He volunteered that without even knowing this is the case that they were looking at. Then they dug a little deeper, and they started revealing this is the case they're looking at. The fact that he volunteered that information in great detail of the crime that they're looking at him committing, is that part of a game? To say that this is a fantasy, but then deny it, yet it's in his writings, and they're looking at an actual moment in history where this took place, where he was?
I'm guessing he had to freshen up the fantasy. And by reliving it again with law enforcement, that makes it a fresh fantasy for him.
Really?
Because when you keep playing the same tapes in your own head for all these years, you have to make a new one. So he just made a new one for himself.
That's why he took that step to make that admission without actually making the admission.
Yeah, maybe, because again, most of what serial killers do is they do it the way they do it so they can fantasize about what they did, both internally and externally, through sex things they do to themselves. And that's all it is. It's all about living that fantasy again and again. It's why they take trophies. It's why they photograph these things. And I know that was what BTK was doing. And so if that tape in their mind gets a little old and stale, and he says, why not reliving that fantasy with someone in control and power? So he's exercising control and power over him by his knowledge, by captivating someone in law enforcement with this story of things he's done. He's just created a new fantasy for himself.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers Podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.